Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and I've been testing the new Sony Xperia XZ2, including its full HD super slow motion video, as my brother eagerly volunteered to chuck mugs of water in my face, all in the name of science. So this is the XZ2, and I think it's a great smartphone. I really do. There's a lot to like here. But it's not without its flaws, including one bizarre flaw issue I've had with it, but I'll talk about later in the video. But for £700 or $800, it does have some strong competition from the likes of the Galaxy S9 and also the Huawei P20. So the XZ2 is going to have to do something pretty special to stand out. But the big news is that Sony has given the XZ2 a fresh new look, with a slightly slimmer bezel around the screen and a curvier design that makes it much more comfortable to hold. It's got some impressive specs too, with a much bigger 5.7-inch 1080p HDR screen, that's up from 5.2 inches on the XZ1. It sports the latest Snapdragon 845 processor, along with 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage. There's a 19 megapixel camera on the back that can now shoot 4K HDR video, as well as super slow motion, 960 FPS at Full HD. Both of these things are firsts in the smartphone world. But we'll come back to the camera in a moment because, as I say, the big story here is this new design, which I'm really pleased to see because we've had the Omnibalance design on Sony phones for the best part of 4 or 5 years now. And while they did look good, they look quite premium with their glass front and back and sharp rectangular corners. They were quite uncomfortable to hold, and they did feel big in the hand. So it's really nice to see, nearly dropped it there, really nice to see something just a little bit different. And it is much more comfortable to hold, thanks to the slightly more rounded corners, and also this gentle curve on the back of the phone. I think it's a big improvement, but it does feel heavy at 198 grams. Although that does also help it feel like quite a premium device, with its glass front and rear and aluminium frame running around the edge. The bezel is narrower than before, but next to the Galaxy S9, Huawei P20 or the iPhone X, well, it still looks a little bit 2016. So they've not followed the notch trend, which may be good news for some, but they have followed the trend of getting rid of the 3.5mm headphone jack. You do get a fingerprint reader below the camera on the back of the phone, which is normally a great location, but in this case, Sony has chosen to position it near the middle of the phone. So as I've been using it, I found as I pick up the phone, I naturally rest my finger on the camera lens rather than the fingerprint reader to unlock it, which is a little bit frustrating. It means I'm getting my grubby fingerprints all over the lens. It's not going to be such an issue if you have smaller hands, but I find it just a little bit uncomfortable. You have to sort of bend your finger down a tiny bit. First world problems I know, but when it comes to a new design, you kind of expect everything to be thought about, so that's not ideal for me. But moving on to the screen, and the 5.7-inch display looks great. It's bright, colourful, and while it does lack the inky blacks and infinite contrast of an AMOLED screen, it still looks good. And I do like the fact that you can adjust the picture mode in the settings based on whether you want accuracy in sRGB mode or just sheer vibrancy. A Quad HD resolution would have been nice, it's just Full HD, but it's not really a problem at this screen size. It still looks really sharp, and it does help it achieve a fantastic battery life. And since the screen supports HDR10, it means you can watch YouTube, Netflix, and Amazon Video content in proper high dynamic range, so you get more vibrant and richer colors. And of course, you can also play back the HDR video shot with the phone's main camera. You can also upscale non-HDR content, but the effect isn't as convincing. It just ups the brightness and sharpness a bit. One thing I've got zero complaints about is the performance. It's snappy and responsive using the latest Snapdragon 845 processor. It's a powerful chip, and the same one used in the US model of the Galaxy S9, so as you would expect, it ran graphically intensive games like Tekken and PUBG flawlessly. But I think more impressively than that, and also I guess more surprisingly, is just how good the battery life is on this phone. 2 hours of YouTube at 50% brightness used just 15% of the battery, so that's at least 10 hours of video playback. And in my recent battery rundown test, the XZ2 came third, but it was only a couple of minutes behind the S9 Plus, so near enough it tied for second place. And considering its relatively small battery, the XZ2 fares really well, and it'll easily get you through a full day. Now when it comes to speakers and audio quality on a phone, there's usually not a whole lot to talk about. But when you're watching something on the XZ2, well, let's just say it's got a little bit of a trick up its sleeve. First of all, Sony say the speakers are now 20% louder than before, and in my testing, music and games sounded clear, punchy and well balanced. But if it's rumble you're after, then Sony have an alternative solution. It's even got a fancy name. It's called the Dynamic Vibration System, and it ties the sound of the games or the video you're playing into the phone's own haptic vibration function. This means it rumbles in time with the on-screen sound. Now it can feel a bit odd at first, but it does also add a bit to the sense of immersion you get when watching and playing stuff. There are only a few compatible games and services as of right now, however it does work with YouTube. If I'm being honest, I think it's a little bit gimmicky, but you can lower the intensity or turn it off completely if you want. But it's a nice option to have. Now for a 2018 phone, it's almost a rare thing to see a phone with just one camera lens. But that doesn't really matter, it's not the end of the world. The Google Pixel 2 proved that with one of the best cameras on the market right now. And the good news is the XZ2 produces some great results. Photos are sharp and detailed with accurate colours. However, it does struggle in low light, particularly with colour accuracy. While the S9 isn't perfect, the colours are much more accurate than the XZ2, which has a significant red tinge to it, which was completely unrealistic. Now as I say, not every phone needs a second camera lens, although it can be nice and add a bit of versatility, but considering Sony have just announced the XZ2 Premium with a new and improved dual camera setup, well, buying the XZ2 now feels like you're missing out on something. However, the XZ2's party piece is its video. You can record 4K 10-bit HDR in HLG format, and for the most part it made my videos look great. Most obvious are the colours, which appear more vivid and more true to life. Bright highlights seem a little bit less overexposed, and shadows retain more detail. But recording in 4K HDR does have a downside. I found that sometimes I'd encounter a juddering effect when panning, especially if I used the steady shot stabilization. But that's not all, because the XZ2 is the first phone in the world to shoot full HD super slow motion video. So that's 960 FPS at 1080p. Previously that was limited to 720p, something the new Galaxy S9 has only just caught up on, but Sony's once again ahead, now offering full HD. So technically it's very impressive, and when you're in good light, it can look good. But the problem is, like before, it's just really hard to use. We had half a dozen or so practice runs because it was nearly impossible to get the timing right. It only records for 0.1 seconds at a time, which results in 3.2 seconds of playback. This may be better if you're recording an ongoing event, but capturing a specific moment, like the water, is really tough. And I'm not totally convinced by the final footage either. The field of view is cropped and it certainly doesn't look like the quality you'd expect from a 1080p image. So the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus may not shoot slow-mo in full HD, but its automatic capture mode that records when it detects movement in the scene makes it much easier to use. And finally, selfies from the 5-megapixel front camera don't look too bad at all. They're sharp, detailed, and in good light there's very little noise. So that is the camera, but I want to go back to talking about the design for just a moment. Because first of all, this new curved back does look nice, but it does add 3mm to the thickness over the previous XZ1. It also makes it incredibly slippery to hold. Even just picking it up, I've fumbled it a couple of times. I definitely recommend putting a case on this. But there's a problem, a bigger problem, that for some reason, on certain surfaces, the XZ2 just likes to wander off. This is the XZ2 slowly sliding around on a seemingly level, unpolished wooden desk, with all vibration and sound off. Even putting the XZ2 on its own box ended up in a trip off the side of my desk, behind a radiator, and resulting in the addition of one of 2018's most notable smartphone trends, a notch. It doesn't always fall off, he says. Although to be fair, I was spinning it there. You could of course get a case, but you shouldn't have to. So, what do I think of the XZ2 overall? Well, there's a lot to like here. I'm happy to see a refreshed design, it feels fast to use, I really do like Sony's software, and the HDR screen and video are nice to have. The battery and the camera are also really impressive. So for a lot of you guys, the question's going to be, should I buy this over, say, the Galaxy S9 or the Huawei P20? Well, I think yes over the P20, as it's the P20 Pro that you'd really want, which does cost quite a bit more. Versus the S9 though, it's tricky. I think for me, overall, I prefer the S9's camera, design, it's easier to use slow-mo, and it is also £60 cheaper. But you can't go wrong with either, and if you do want a Sony phone because you like their software, then absolutely, buy the XZ2. It's not perfect, but it's still a great phone. So that is what I think, but what do you reckon? Are you a fan of the new design? Are you considering buying the XZ2? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, click that like and subscribe button below, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.